All right, let's break this down into the simplest form, step by step, like you're learning for the very first time. Background. What is partition? Partition means splitting or dividing something into parts. In this case, it refers to the partition of Bengal in 1905 by the British government in India. Who were Lord Minto and Lord Curzon? Lord Curzon was the British Viceroy of India at the time. He was the one who decided to divide Bengal. His successor, Lord Minto, came after him and also supported this division, but he thought it could have been done more carefully. Why did the British divide Bengal? Bengal was a huge province at that time, and it was difficult to manage or govern. The British said they were dividing it to make it easier to control. They split it into East Bengal and West Bengal, but there was a hidden reason behind it. The hidden reason, the British strategy. Bengal was the center of Indian nationalism. This means many people in Bengal were fighting for India's freedom from British rule. The British feared this growing unity, so they thought that if they split Bengal, they could divide the people. The Hindus lived mostly in West Bengal, and the Muslims lived mostly in East Bengal. By dividing them, the British thought the Hindus and Muslims would start fighting with each other instead of fighting together for India's freedom. This is why Lord Minto said it was a good political strategy. Even though people were angry about the partition, the British thought it was smart to divide them and make ruling easier. How did Indian nationalists react? Indian nationalists are people who wanted freedom for India. They clearly saw what the British were trying to do. They realized the British wanted to weaken the unity between Hindus and Muslims. They were angry and condemned, spoke against the partition. The birth of the anti-partition movement. Because of this, the people started the anti-partition movement. The main part of this was the Swadeshi movement. What is the Swadeshi movement? Swadeshi means own country. In this movement, people decided to boycott British goods, stop using anything made by the British, use only Indian-made products. The idea was to hurt the British economically and show that Indians could be self-sufficient, take care of themselves without British help. Example for better understanding. Imagine you are in a class and the students are starting to unite against an unfair teacher. The teacher fears that the students will demand changes, so the teacher decides to split the class into two groups based on who likes one subject and who likes another. This way, the students won't unite and will focus on their own issues. Some might even fight amongst themselves, making it easier for the teacher to maintain control. This is similar to what the British did in Bengal, divide to rule. Conclusion. Bigger picture. The partition was more than just dividing land. It was a British tactic to weaken Indian unity. The Indian nationalists knew this and started a movement to protest it. They promoted Swadeshi as a way to show their resistance and fight for their freedom. Does that make sense so far? Feel free to ask more questions if you need more clarity. Certainly. Here's the text copied exactly as you requested. What happened in December 1903? In December 1903, the British announced that they wanted to divide Bengal. This was called the Partition of Bengal. Partition means splitting or dividing something. Here, it meant dividing Bengal into two parts. The British said they wanted to do this to make Bengal easier to manage, but people quickly realized that the British had other reasons. They wanted to weaken the unity of the people in Bengal, especially because many people in Bengal were fighting for India's freedom. How did people react? When people found out about this plan, they were very angry. They knew the real reason behind the partition, and they immediately began protesting. Protest means standing up against something you think is wrong. In this case, the protest was against the British plan to divide Bengal. How strong was the protest? The protest was very strong and quick. Here's what happened. 500 protest meetings were held in the first 2 months after the announcement. A meeting is when people gather to talk about an issue and make plans to take action. These meetings happened in cities like Dhaka, now called Dhaka, Mymensingh, Chittagong. People didn't just stop at meetings. They also made pamphlets. A pamphlet is a small booklet or paper that gives information. These pamphlets explained why the partition of Bengal was a bad idea. 50,000 pamphlets were printed and spread all over Bengal to make sure that everyone knew why the partition was wrong. Who led the protest? Leaders played a big role in the protest. Some of the main leaders were Surendranath Banerjee, Krishna Kumar Mitra, Prithwish Chandra Ray. These leaders helped organize the protest and spread the message about why the partition was wrong. They also used the press, newspapers, and journals to spread their ideas. Some of the important newspapers they used were the Bengali, Hitabadi, Sanjivani. These newspapers wrote articles and opinions criticizing the British and their plan to divide Bengal. Big protest meetings. Some really big meetings happened in Calcutta, now Kolkata. One was held in March 1904. Another was held in January 1905. In these meetings, people talked about how the partition would hurt the unity of Bengal and how it was part of the British plan to weaken India. Petitions and memoranda. People didn't just talk about the issue. They also wrote petitions and memoranda. A petition is a written request signed by people asking the government to do something. A memorandum is a more formal letter, usually sent to important government officials. People sent these petitions and memoranda to the government of India and even to the Secretary of State in England, hoping to stop the partition. From the Dhaka division alone, 69 petitions were sent. Some petitions were signed by 70,000 people. That's a lot of people for that time, because not many people were involved in politics back then. Who else joined the protest? Usually, the big zamindars, landowners, were loyal to the British. They worked with the British because they had land and wealth to protect. But this time, even they joined the protest. This was surprising because zamindars usually stayed out of politics, but now they were standing with the Congress leaders. Congress leaders were people who were educated and worked in jobs like journalism, law, and other respected professions. Together, they all worked to stop the partition. How did they protest? The moderate phase. Between 1903 to mid-1905, the protest used moderate methods. Moderate means they used peaceful ways to protest, not violence or extreme actions. Here's how they protested. Petitions. People wrote to the government asking them to stop the partition. Memoranda. They sent formal letters to the government officials explaining why the partition was unfair. Speeches. Leaders gave speeches at big meetings, telling people why they needed to fight against the partition. Public meetings. They held large gatherings where people came together to protest and show their support for Bengal's unity. Press campaigns. The leaders used newspapers to spread their message. These newspapers printed articles and opinions about how the partition would hurt Bengal. What did they want? Their main goal was to make people in India and England realize that the partition was wrong. They hoped that if enough people protested, the British government would feel the pressure and stop the partition. Example for better understanding. Let's say your school decides to divide the playground into two parts, one for football and one for basketball. You and your friends like to play both games together, so you don't want the division. You hear about the plan and immediately start protesting. You hold meetings with your friends, and some kids from other classes join too. You all write a letter, a petition, to the principal, saying the division is unfair. You also make pamphlets that explain why the playground shouldn't be divided and give them to other students. Even kids who usually don't care about these things join your protest because they also love playing on the playground. You hope that by doing all this, the principal will change their mind and stop the division. This is very similar to how the people of Bengal protested against the partition. Conclusion. Why was this important? The partition of Bengal was about more than just dividing land. It was a political strategy by the British to divide the people and weaken the fight for freedom. The people of Bengal saw through this plan and started protesting immediately. They used peaceful methods like petitions, meetings, and press campaigns to try to stop the partition. This protest showed the power of unity and the importance of standing up against injustice, even when it's done by a powerful government. Let me know if you need anything else. Sure. Here's the text copied exactly as you requested. Step 1. The British decide to divide Bengal. In 1905, India was still under the control of the British government. The British decided to divide Bengal, a large state in India, into two parts. Eastern Bengal, where many Muslims lived. Western Bengal, where more Hindus lived. The British said they were doing this because Bengal was too big to govern easily. But the real reason was that the British wanted to weaken the unity of Indians. If Hindus and Muslims were divided, the British thought it would be easier to control India. Step 2. The Indian people are angry. Many Indians got angry when they heard the news about the partition. They believed this was a way for the British to break their unity and make them fight among themselves. Indian leaders, who wanted freedom from British rule, thought this was a bad decision. Step 3. Protests start. Even though many people protested, spoke out against it, the British ignored them. On the 19th of July 1905, the British officially announced that Bengal would be divided. Step 4. People begin to protest in new ways. After the announcement, people realized that their normal ways of protesting, like peaceful petitions, which are formal requests, were not working. New types of protests started. People began organizing meetings in small towns. These towns are called Mufusal towns. For example, meetings were held in towns like Dinajpur, Pabna, Faridpur, Jessore, and many others. At these meetings, people came up with the idea of boycotting British goods. What does boycott mean? Boycotting means refusing to buy or use goods or services as a way of protest. The people of Bengal decided to stop buying British products. This would hurt the British economy, how much money the British were making in India, because fewer people were buying their goods. Example of a boycott. Imagine you and your friends decide to stop buying snacks from the school canteen because the prices are unfair. The canteen makes money from students, so if all the students refuse to buy from it, the canteen will lose money. Eventually, the canteen might have to lower the prices to satisfy the students. Step 5. The Swadeshi movement starts on the 7th of August 1905. A big meeting was held at the Calcutta Town Hall. This was a very important meeting because it was the official start of the Swadeshi movement. What is Swadeshi? Swadeshi means using goods made in your own country, in this case, India. The Swadeshi movement was all about encouraging Indians to use Indian-made products instead of buying goods made in Britain. Example of Swadeshi. Think of Swadeshi like this. Imagine you live in a neighborhood with many shops. Instead of going to a big foreign supermarket, you and your family decide to only shop from local stores that are owned by people in your community. This helps the local stores make money and supports your community. Step 6. The boycott resolution. During the meeting at the Calcutta Town Hall, a decision was made to boycott all British goods. This was called the boycott resolution. Even moderate leaders like Surendranath Banerjee, who usually worked peacefully with the British, started supporting the boycott. Surendranath Banerjee and other leaders traveled to different parts of India, telling people to stop buying British items like Manchester cloth, a type of British-made fabric, and Liverpool salt that came from the British city of Liverpool. Step 7. The British government announces the partition date. On the 1st of September 1905, the British government announced that the partition of Bengal would happen on the 16th October 1905. This made the people of Bengal even more upset, and the protests grew stronger. Step 8. Huge protests in Bengal. Protest meetings were being held almost every day in Bengal. In some places, like Barisal, 10,000 to 12,000 people gathered for these meetings. That's a lot of people coming together to show how angry they were. Step 9. The boycott begins to work. The boycott of British goods had a big effect on the British businesses in India. The value of British cloth sold in some districts of Bengal dropped by 5 to 15 times. This means a lot fewer people were buying British cloth because they were supporting Indian-made products instead. Example to simplify. Imagine if in your school, every student refused to buy school uniform from the store that the school recommended because it was too expensive. Instead, the students and their families decided to make their own uniforms at home or buy them from local tailors. The school store would soon lose a lot of money and might be forced to change its prices or close down. Step 10. What did this movement achieve? The Swadeshi movement and the boycott of British goods showed the power of unity. When people come together for a common cause, they can make a big impact. The British government lost a lot of money because Indians stopped buying British products. This was a big success for the Indian people. The Swadeshi movement also helped Indians feel more proud of their own country and culture. They started to understand that they didn't need to depend on the British. They could support their own industries and use Indian-made products. Additional information. The Swadeshi movement was the start of a larger struggle for India's freedom. It wasn't just about boycotting goods. It was about building national pride and showing the British that Indians could fight back in their own way. This movement later inspired many other freedom fighters, like Mahatma Gandhi, who used similar methods, such as boycotts and protests, to fight for India's independence. Sure. I will explain this step by step in the simplest way possible with examples to make it clearer. The Partition of Bengal and the Day of Mourning. What was the Partition of Bengal? In 1905, the British government decided to divide the large Indian state of Bengal into two parts. Eastern Bengal, where more Muslims lived. Western Bengal, where more Hindus lived. The British said Bengal was too big to govern, but most people believed the real reason was to divide the people and weaken their unity. If Hindus and Muslims were separated, the British could more easily control them. The day the partition took effect, 16th of October 1905. On this day, the partition officially started, and the people of Bengal were very upset. They decided to make this day a day of mourning, which means a day to show their sadness and protest. How did people protest on the 16th of October 1905? Fasting and no cooking. Fasting means not eating any food. On this day, many people in Bengal chose to fast. They also didn't light any fires in their homes to cook food. This was their way of showing how deeply they were hurt by the British decision to divide Bengal. Hartal in Calcutta. Hartal means a day when all businesses, shops, and schools close down as a form of protest. In Calcutta, a major city in Bengal, everyone decided to close their shops and businesses, so the city was quiet as a sign of protest against the partition. Processions. People walked in large groups, called processions, on the streets to show their protest. They walked barefoot, without shoes, to show their seriousness and devotion to the cause. Many people also went to the Ganges River, a holy river in India, early in the morning to take a bath as part of their protest. Singing Bande Mataram. As people walked in processions, they sang a song called Bande Mataram, which means Hail to the Motherland, or Praise the Motherland. This song became the anthem main song of the protest and made people feel united in their love for their country. Rakhi, a symbol of unity. What is a Rakhi? Rakhi is a special thread that people tie on each other's wrists to symbolize love and protection. It is usually tied during the festival of Raksha Bandhan. Why did they use Rakhis during the protest? On the 16th of October, people in Bengal tied Rakhis on each other's wrists to show their unity. Even though the British had divided Bengal, the people wanted to show that they were still united in spirit and would not let the British division separate them. Huge mass meetings. Big meetings with leaders. Ananda Mohan Bose and Surendranath Banerjee, two important Indian leaders, gave speeches to large crowds of people. How many people came? The meetings had 50,000 to 75,000 people, which was a huge number. Imagine a big stadium full of people all gathering to listen to speeches and protest against the partition of Bengal. Donations to support the movement. People were so moved by the speeches that they started donating money to support the Swadeshi movement. In just a few hours, they raised $50,000, which was a huge amount of money at that time. The movement grew stronger. What happened after the partition? The partition of Bengal made people more determined to fight for their rights. As one leader, Abdul Rasul, said, "What we couldn't do in 50 or 100 years, this partition has done in 6 months." This means that the partition made people so angry that they quickly united and started protesting. something they hadn't done so strongly before. What is the Swadeshi movement? The Swadeshi movement was all about using goods made in India instead of buying products made in Britain. Why was it important? If people stopped buying British goods, the British economy, how much money they made, India would suffer. This was a peaceful but powerful way for Indians to fight back against British rule. Example of Swadeshi. Imagine, you are in school, and the school canteen sells snacks made by a big company. But you and your friends decide to stop buying snacks from the canteen because they are too expensive or unfair. Instead, you start buying snacks from small local shops. This will hurt the big company because they won't make as much money from students anymore. This is like the Swadeshi movement, where people refuse to buy British products to hurt British businesses. To summarize, 1. The British divided Bengal to weaken the unity of Indians. 2. People were very angry and protested on the 16th of October 1905 by fasting, not cooking, closing businesses, and walking in processions. 3. They sang Vande Mataram and tied Rakis on each other's wrists to show unity. 4. Big meetings were held and thousands of people attended. 5. The Swadeshi movement started, encouraging people to use Indian goods instead of British goods. This movement showed how strong and united people could be when they came together for a common cause. It was a big step toward India's fight for freedom from British rule. Let me explain this step by step in the simplest way possible. The Swadeshi movement. The Swadeshi movement was about boycotting, not using, foreign goods, especially British products, and using Indian-made goods instead. This movement started in Bengal after the British divided Bengal in 1905. People in Bengal were angry and started using Indian goods to protest against British rule. The movement spread to other parts of India. The message of Swadeshi, use Indian goods, and the boycott of foreign goods quickly spread beyond Bengal to the rest of India. Many leaders from different parts of the country started spreading the Swadeshi message in their own regions. Leaders who spread the Swadeshi message. Lokmanya Tilak. Lokmanya Tilak was a very important leader from Maharashtra. He took the Swadeshi movement to different parts of India, especially to Pune, now Pune, and Bombay, now Mumbai. Example. Imagine you learn about recycling at school and then tell your friends in your neighborhood about it. Lokmanya Tilak did something similar. He heard about Swadeshi and then spread the message to other cities, making more people join the movement. Number 2. Ajit Singh and Lala Lajpat Rai. Ajit Singh and Lala Lajpat Rai were leaders from Punjab, northern India. They took the message of Swadeshi to Punjab and other parts of northern India. They helped people in Punjab understand the importance of using Indian goods and rejecting British products. 3. Syed Haidar Raza. Syed Haidar Raza led the Swadeshi movement in Delhi, the capital city of India. He encouraged people in Delhi to stop using foreign goods and to support Indian businesses. 4. Other places with active participation. The Swadeshi movement also spread to Rawalpindi, Kangra, Jammu, Multan, and Hardwar. These are cities and regions in northern India where people actively took part in the movement. People in these places started using Indian goods and boycotting British products, just like the people in Bengal. 5. Chidambaram Pillai. Chidambaram Pillai was a leader from the Madras Presidency, now part of southern India. He helped spread the Swadeshi message to the southern part of India. The people in the Madras Presidency also joined the movement and started supporting Indian-made goods. 6. Bipin Chandra Pal. Bipin Chandra Pal was one of the main leaders of the Swadeshi movement in Bengal. He went on an extensive lecture tour, which means he traveled to different parts of the country, giving speeches to inspire people to join the movement. His speeches and ideas helped people in different parts of India understand why it was important to support the Swadeshi movement. What does this all mean? The Swadeshi movement started in Bengal, but spread across the whole country because of the efforts of these leaders. Leaders from different regions took the message of Swadeshi and spread it in their own areas. People in different cities and regions started to support Indian-made goods and boycott British products. Example to understand. Think of Swadeshi like this. Imagine you and your friends decide to stop buying snacks from a big company because they are too expensive, and instead you start making and buying snacks from your local bakery. Now, if you tell your friends in other cities to do the same, and they start buying snacks only from their local bakeries too, then this idea spreads. That's what happened with Swadeshi. The idea started in one place, Bengal, but soon it spread to the rest of the country with the help of leaders like Tilak, Lala Lajpat Rai, and others. Why was this important? The British economy in India depended on selling their goods to Indians. By not buying British goods, Indians hurt the British economy. It showed that Indians were becoming more united and determined to fight against British rule in a peaceful way. This movement was a big step in India's freedom struggle because it made people aware of the power of unity and self-reliance, depending on themselves, not the British. Let's break down the events and ideas in more detail, but in a very simple way, step by step. Indian National Congress and Swadeshi Movement. 1. Indian National Congress. INC is a group of Indian leaders who got together to help India become independent from British rule. They met once a year to decide how to achieve their goal. 2. Swadeshi and boycott movements. Swadeshi means using things made in India. People were asked to buy Indian goods and stop buying things made by the British. Boycott means refusing to use or buy British goods as a way to protest British rule. 3. Banaras Session, 1905. In 1905, the INC had a meeting in Banaras, Varanasi. The leader of this meeting was Gopal Krishna Gokhale. In this meeting, the Congress supported the Swadeshi movement and the boycott movement in Bengal because Bengal was partitioned by the British. People were unhappy with the partition, so they decided to protest by using Swadeshi and boycott. 2 groups, moderates and extremists. 4. Moderates, early nationalists. These were leaders who believed in making slow changes and working peacefully with the British. Gopal Krishna Gokhale was one of these moderate leaders. He wanted to talk to the British and slowly bring about changes. 5. Extremists, radical nationalists. These leaders wanted faster and stronger action against the British. They believed that India should be independent and they wanted to fight for it. Leaders like Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Bipin Chandra Pal, Lala Lajpat Rai, and Aurobindo Ghosh were part of this group. They didn't want to just focus on Swadeshi and boycott. They wanted a bigger goal, Swaraj, or complete self-rule. 6. What is Swaraj? Swaraj means that India should rule itself without the British. The extremists believed that just undoing the partition of Bengal wasn't enough. They wanted to go beyond that and make India completely free from British control. Important meetings in 1906 and 1907. 7. Calcutta Session, 1906. The INC met again, this time in Calcutta. The leader of this meeting was Dadabhai Naoroji, one of the oldest and most respected leaders of Congress. Naoroji made an important statement during this meeting. He said that the goal of the INC is Swaraj, or self-rule for India. He said that India should have self-government, just like other British colonies, such as Canada or Australia. This was a big step because now even the Congress was thinking about complete independence for India. 8. Surat Session, 1907. In 1907, the INC had another meeting in Surat. By this time, the moderates and the extremists were arguing a lot. The moderates wanted to go slowly and peacefully. The extremists wanted to act quickly and strongly. During this meeting, the Congress split into 2 groups because they couldn't agree on how to move forward. This split was bad for the movement because the leaders were no longer working together. Consequences of the split. 9. What happened after the split? The split in the INC made the fight for freedom harder. When leaders don't agree, it's difficult to have a strong movement. The Swadeshi movement was also affected because the leaders weren't united anymore. Even though both groups wanted India to be free, they had different ideas about how to achieve that goal. Moderates wanted to be patient and peaceful. Extremists wanted to be strong and fast in their actions. Example to understand. Let's use a simple example to understand this better. Imagine you're in a group of students who want to change the school rules. Some students, moderates, want to talk to the teachers and slowly make changes, little by little. They think being calm and patient will work. Other students, extremists, want to make changes quickly. They think organizing the whole school and protesting will bring faster results. If these two groups start arguing, they will not be able to work together, and the goal of changing the school rules might fail because they are no longer united. Summary. 1. The INC started supporting the Swadeshi and boycott movements to protest the partition of Bengal. 2. There were two groups in the Congress. Moderates wanted slow, peaceful change, and extremists wanted quick, strong action. 3. The goal of the extremists was Swaraj, complete self-rule. 4. In 1906, the INC declared that their goal was Swaraj, self-government. 5. In 1907, the Congress split into two groups because they couldn't agree on how to move forward. This weakened the movement. This breakdown should make it easier to understand the key events and ideas. Sure. Let's break this down even further, step by step, to ensure you understand everything clearly. We will focus on the Swadeshi movement after 1905 and how the radical nationalists played a big role in it. Overview of the Swadeshi movement. 1. What is the Swadeshi movement? The Swadeshi movement was a campaign in India that started in the early 1900s. It aimed to promote Indian goods and stop using British products to protest British rule. Swadeshi means of one's own country in Hindi, which refers to using local Indian goods instead of imported British goods. Number 2. What happened after 1905? In 1905, there was a big event, the Partition of Bengal. This decision by the British government was very unpopular. The partition was intended to divide the people and weaken the nationalist movement. After this decision, many Indians became angry and wanted to fight against British rule more actively. The rise of radical nationalists. 3. Who were the radical nationalists? The radical nationalists were leaders who wanted stronger action against British rule. They were different from the moderates, who preferred peaceful methods like writing letters and holding discussions. Some important radical nationalists included Bal Gangadhar Tilak, Bipin Chandra Pal, Lala Lajpat Rai, and Aurobindo Ghosh. 4. What did the radical nationalists want? They wanted to change their approach from polite requests to more direct action. They believed that to get freedom, they needed to involve more people in their fight against British rule. New strategies and methods. 5. Moving away from polite requests. The older methods of using petitions, written requests, and speeches to ask for rights were becoming less effective. The radical nationalists decided that simply asking nicely was not enough. They needed to take stronger actions. 6. Boycott of British goods. The new strategy was to boycott British goods. This means refusing to buy anything made by the British. They wanted to spread this boycott to many areas of life, not just buying goods. This is known as the extended boycott. Extended boycott explained. 7. What is an extended boycott? The extended boycott included not just boycotting British cloth or products, but also boycotting schools, not attending schools run by the British. Boycotting courts, not using British courts for legal matters. Boycotting government jobs, not working for the British government. Organizing strikes. Workers would stop working to protest British policies. Example. Imagine you and your friends decide to not only stop buying snacks from a vending machine, but also refuse to eat at the school cafeteria and not attend any school events until your school changes its rules. This way, you show you're serious about your cause. Goal of the movement. 8. What was the aim? The ultimate goal was to make British rule impossible in India. They wanted the British to feel the pressure so much that they would have to leave India. They believed if enough people refused to cooperate with the British government would have no power. Example. If all the students stopped going to class, the school would struggle to operate. This would make the school administration have to listen to the students' demands. 2 views on resistance 9. Peaceful resistance versus violent resistance. Some leaders, like Aurobindo Ghosh, thought it might be necessary to use violence if the British government responded harshly to protests. Others believed in peaceful resistance, using non-violent methods to achieve their goals. Example: if your school ignored your peaceful protests, some students might think about getting louder or making more noise to get attention, while others would continue to protest quietly. Summary of key points. 1. Radical nationalists became more important in the Swadeshi movement after 1905. 2. They moved away from polite requests to stronger actions like boycotting. 3. Their strategy was to involve as many people as possible to make British rule difficult. 4. The extended boycott included not just refusing British goods, but also not using British schools, courts, and jobs. 5. Their ultimate goal was to make British rule impossible in India. 6. There were different opinions among leaders about whether to use peaceful or violent methods. Final example to simplify further. Imagine you're in a school where the principal makes rules that you think are unfair. You start with polite requests, but when those don't work, you and your friends decide to refuse to buy snacks from the cafeteria, boycott, and even stop going to classes. Extended boycott. Some of your friends think that if the principal doesn't listen after all this, they might have to get louder or even disrupt classes to be heard. This is how the Swadeshi movement changed from polite protests to more active and organized efforts to achieve freedom from British rule. Feel free to ask if you have any questions or need more clarification on any part. Let's break this down step by step so you can easily understand the key ideas about the Swadeshi movement and how people responded to it through boycotts and mass mobilization. Key concepts of the Swadeshi movement. 1. What is boycott? A boycott means refusing to buy or use certain goods or services. In the context of the Swadeshi movement, it meant not buying British-made products. Success of the boycott. 2. Visible success of the boycott. The boycott of foreign goods was the most successful part of the Swadeshi movement. People all over India, especially in Bengal, participated actively. 3. How did people boycott? Public burning of foreign cloth. People would gather and burn foreign cloth to show their anger and commitment to using only Indian-made products. Picketing shops. Volunteers stood outside shops that sold foreign goods, telling customers not to buy those items. Examples of boycott. Women stopped wearing foreign bangles and instead wore local ones. Washermen refused to wash clothes made from foreign materials. Priests turned down offerings that included foreign sugar. Example. Imagine if everyone in your school decided to stop eating chocolate bars from a specific brand because they wanted to support a local candy maker. They might even have a big event where they gather to throw away those chocolate bars together. That's similar to what people did with foreign cloth. Mass mobilization. 4. What is mass mobilization? Mass mobilization means getting a lot of people together to support a cause or movement. In the Swadeshi movement, this was done through public meetings and processions. 5. How did they mobilize? Public meetings. People gathered in large groups to discuss the movement, share ideas, and encourage each other to participate. Processions. People marched together through the streets, holding signs and shouting slogans to show their support for the Swadeshi movement. These gatherings happened not just in big cities, but also in villages and smaller towns. Example. Think about a school rally where everyone comes together in the playground to show support for a new school rule. Students might hold signs and chant to express their feelings. That's what happened during the Swadeshi movement. Importance of these actions. 6. Why were these actions important? The boycott showed that ordinary people could take action against British rule. Public meetings and processions helped spread the message of the Swadeshi movement and brought more people into it. 7. Long-term impact. The methods of boycotting and holding public gatherings continued to be important in later phases of the Indian independence movement. They became common ways for people to express their feelings and organize for change. Summary. 1. The boycott of foreign goods was very successful in the Swadeshi movement. 2. People participated in the boycott by burning foreign cloth, picketing shops that sold foreign goods, refusing to use foreign products like bangles and utensils. 3. Mass mobilization through public meetings and processions helped spread the Swadeshi sentiment. 4. These actions were important for building a sense of unity among Indians and encouraging participation in the freedom struggle. Final example. Imagine if a big sports brand was getting too popular and local sports shops were closing down. People in your town might decide to boycott the brand. They would burn the brand's jerseys, stop buying their shoes, and gather to talk about how important it is to support local sports shops. They might also march together in the streets with signs saying, "Support." This shows the power of community action, just like what happened during the Swadeshi movement. If you have any questions or need more examples, feel free to ask. Let's explore the core of volunteers, Samitis, in the Swadeshi movement more deeply, step by step, while keeping it simple and easy to understand. What were Samitis? 1. Definition. Samitis are groups of volunteers who came together during the Swadeshi movement in India. Their main goal was to promote Indian products and culture and to oppose British rule. 2. Purpose. The Samitis aimed to make people aware of the importance of using goods made in India instead of foreign products. They wanted to encourage people to take action against the British government and to support each other in their communities. Example. Swadesh Bandhab Samiti. 3. Key group. One of the most famous Samitis was the Swadesh Bandhab Samiti. It was started by a school teacher named Ashwini Kumar Dutt in a place called Barisal. 4. Growth. The Samiti grew quickly, with 159 branches spreading out to many villages. They reached even the most remote areas, making sure that everyone knew about the Swadeshi movement. Activities of the Samitis. 5. Spreading the message. Magic lantern lectures. These were like early slideshows where images were projected to share important messages. They helped people understand why using Indian goods was essential. Swadeshi songs. The Samitis created songs that encouraged people to support Indian products. Singing these songs helped spread enthusiasm and unity among people. 6. Training and support. Physical and moral training. They organized activities to help people become physically strong and morally upright. This training prepared people to stand against British rule. Social work. During difficult times like famines, when there isn't enough food, or disease outbreaks, the Samitis helped communities. They provided food, medical assistance, and support to families in need. 7. Education. Schools. The Samitis set up schools to educate children, especially in rural areas. These schools taught children about Indian culture and values. Training in crafts. They taught people how to make things like clothes and tools using local materials. This encouraged self-reliance, as people learned to depend on their skills rather than foreign goods. 8. Conflict resolution. Arbitration courts. The Samitis helped resolve conflicts in communities. For example, if two neighbors disagreed over land or money, they could come to the Samiti to find a fair solution. By August 1906, the Barisal Samiti settled 523 disputes through 89 committees. The impact of Samitis. 9. Community involvement. The Samitis encouraged many ordinary people to get involved in the Swadeshi movement. This created a strong sense of unity and togetherness among the people. 10. Growing popularity. The Samitis became very popular, especially in rural areas. People were excited to support each other and their country. British officials noticed this growing support and became worried about the Samitis' influence. Why were Samitis important? 11. Building a movement. Samitis helped transform the Swadeshi movement into a mass movement by reaching out to everyday people. They created platforms where people could express their opinions and work together. 12. Example of community power. Think of the Samitis like a big team together to help everyone in their town or village. Just like how a soccer team practices together and supports each other to win games, Samitas brought people together to fight for their rights and promote their culture. Summary of key points. Samitas were volunteer groups that spread the message of the Swadeshi movement. The Swadesh Bandab Samiti, led by Ashwini Kumar Dutt, was a significant example of these groups. They organized activities like lectures, songs, physical training, social work, and schools. The Samitas helped resolve disputes and built a sense of community among people. Their efforts made the movement popular and gave ordinary people a voice against British rule. Final thought. The work of the Samitis was crucial in uniting people across different regions and backgrounds to stand against foreign rule. They showed that ordinary people could come together to make a difference and fight for their rights. If you have any specific questions or want to learn more about a particular part, feel free to ask. Let's break down how the Swadeshi movement used traditional festivals and cultural events to spread its message, step by simple language. What was the Swadeshi movement? 1. Definition. The Swadeshi movement was a movement in India that encouraged people to use Indian-made products and to oppose British goods. 2. Purpose. The goal was to promote Indian culture and help India become independent from British rule, using festivals to spread the message. Festivals. Festivals are special events where people celebrate, usually with fun activities like singing, dancing, and eating. During the Swadeshi movement, some festivals were used to share important ideas with many people. 4. Ganapati Festival. This festival is dedicated to Lord Ganesh, a popular Hindu god. Bal Gangadhar Tilak, a leader in the movement, encouraged people to celebrate this festival with a focus on Indian culture and unity. During this time, speeches were made about using Indian products and opposing British goods. 5. Shivaji Festival. This festival honors Shivaji, a famous Indian king known for fighting against foreign rulers. Tilak also popularized this festival to remind people of India's proud history and to inspire them to stand up against British rule. 6. Impact of festivals. Festivals became a way to gather large crowds of people. During these celebrations, leaders spoke about the Swadeshi movement, encouraging people to support Indian goods. Traditional folk theater. Jatra 7. What are jatras? Jatras are traditional folk theater performances popular in Bengal and other parts of India. They tell stories through music, dance, and acting. 8. Using jatras for Swadeshi. The Swadeshi movement used jatras to share its message with ordinary people. The stories often included themes about pride in Indian culture and the importance of supporting Indian products. 9. Why this was effective. Many people who attended these performances might not have understood political ideas before. Jatras made it easier for them to learn about the Swadeshi movement in a fun and entertaining way. Reaching out to the masses. 10. Making political ideas accessible. The festivals and jatras helped introduce new political ideas to many people for the first time. By using familiar cultural practices, leaders made it easier for everyone to understand the importance of the movement. 11. Example. Imagine if you wanted to teach your friends about a game. Instead of just telling them the rules, you invite them to play the game together. Similarly, by using festivals and performances, leaders made learning about the Swadeshi movement exciting and engaging. Summary of key points. The Swadeshi movement used traditional festivals like Ganapati and Shivaji to spread its message. Bal Gangadhar Tilak promoted these festivals to encourage unity and pride in Indian culture. Jatras, a form of folk theater, helped share the Swadeshi message in a fun and understandable way. These cultural events made it easier for ordinary people to learn about and support the movement. Final thought. Using fest theater to share important ideas is a powerful way to connect with people. Just as we celebrate events in our lives, the Swadeshi movement used celebrations to unite people and inspire them to take action for their country. If you want to know more about any specific part or have any questions, feel free to ask. Let's break it down even more simply and in greater detail, step by step. What is self-reliance, Atmasakti, in the Swadeshi movement? 1. Self-reliance meaning. Self-reliance means relying on yourself instead of others. In the Swadeshi movement, Atmasakti, self-reliance, was about making sure that Indians didn't depend on the British for anything. This was important because if Indians could take care of themselves, it would show the British that they could no longer control India. 2. Why was it important? Atmasakti gave Indians confidence, dignity, and pride in themselves. It was part of the fight against British rule, proving that India could be strong and stand on its own without foreign help. Self-reliance in villages. 3. What happened in the villages? The leaders of the Swadeshi movement knew that most Indians lived in villages. So, if they could make the villages stronger, the whole country would become stronger. They encouraged people to work together and help each other. 4. What kind of help? They worked to improve village life by fighting against social evils, bad customs and practices. For example, caste oppression. Some people were treated unfairly because they belonged to a lower caste. The movement wanted to end this. Early marriage. In those days, many children were forced to marry very young. They wanted to stop this and let children grow up before marriage. Dowry system. Families had to give money or gifts when their daughters got married. This was unfair and often caused problems for poor families. Alcohol abuse. Drinking too much alcohol was harming families, so they encouraged people to stop drinking. Swadeshi, Indian-made education. 5. What is Swadeshi education? Swadeshi means made in India, or belonging to India. Swadeshi education was about teaching Indian students in an Indian way, not in the British way. 6. Inspired by Tagore's Shantiniketan, Rabindranath Tagore started a special school called Shantiniketan. In this school, students learned Indian culture and traditions. This inspired other people in India to start more schools that focused on Indian ways of learning. Bengal National College 7. What was the Bengal National College? To spread Indian education, a new school called the Bengal National College was started. Aurobindo, a famous leader, was the principal of this college. This college was part of the plan to make education for Indians and by Indians. National Council of Education, 1906. 8. What was the National Council of Education? In August 1906, Indian leaders formed a group called the National Council of Education. Their job was to create a new education system for India, not controlled by the British. 9. What were their goals? They wanted to teach literature, science, and technical skills in a way that was Indian and not influenced by foreign powers. Their idea was to provide education from primary school to university that was based on Indian values and culture. 10. Teaching in local languages. To make education accessible to everyone, they decided to teach in local languages, also called vernacular. This way, even those who didn't speak English could learn easily. Technical education and learning from Japan. 11. Technical education. Technical education means learning practical skills like engineering, science, and manufacturing. To support this, they started the Bengal Technical Institute, where students could learn these important skills. 12. Learning from Japan. At the time, Japan was becoming very strong and modern, and India wanted to learn from them. So they sent students to Japan to learn advanced technical skills and bring that knowledge back to India to help the country grow. Example to understand it better. Imagine your village depends on a big company from another country to get food and clothes. But your village decides one day, we are going to grow our own food and make our own clothes. This makes your village independent, proud, and strong. You don't need the foreign company anymore. This is exactly what India wanted to do with the Swadeshi movement. Make everything within India, including products, education, and knowledge. Key takeaways. Self-reliance, Atmasakti, was about making India independent from the British. In the villages, they worked to end bad practices like caste oppression, early marriage, dowry, and alcohol abuse. The movement started a lot of Swadeshi schools and colleges to teach He in an Indian way and make Indians strong. They also focused on teaching technical skills. and even sent students to Japan to learn advanced technologies. By focusing on self-reliance, the Swadeshi movement helped make Indians confident, educated, and ready to build a strong, independent country. If anything is unclear, or if you have more questions, feel free to ask. Let's break it down step by step, using even simpler language to understand the main ideas clearly. What does self-reliance, or Atmasakti, mean? 1. Self-reliance means that you should try to do things on your own, without asking for help from others, especially from people or countries that control you. For India, during the Swadeshi movement, this meant that Indians wanted to stop depending on the British for goods and services. Instead, they wanted to make their own products and take care of themselves. Setting up Indian Swadeshi businesses too. During this time, Swadeshi businesses were started. These were businesses run by Indians and made Indian products. Examples: textile mills to make clothes, soap factories, match factories, tanneries where leather is made, banks, insurance companies, and shops. 3. Some businesses didn't last long, because the people who started them didn't have a lot of experience in running a business. They were more focused on the idea of helping India become independent rather than knowing how to run a company. 4. However, some businesses became very successful. One famous example is Acharya P.C. Ray's Bengal chemicals factory. It became a well-known and successful company. Swadeshi's impact on culture. The Swadeshi movement not only affected businesses, but also had a big impact on Indian culture. Music and songs. 5. Many patriotic songs about love for the country, were written during this time by people like Rabindranath Tagore, Rajanikant Sen, Dwijendralal Ray, Mukunda Das, Syed Abu Muhammad. 6. These songs were important because they helped people feel proud of India and gave them the courage to fight for freedom. A famous song by Rabindranath Tagore, called Amar Sonar Bangla, was later used as the national anthem of Bangladesh in 1971. 7. These songs are still very popular today and have inspired different groups of people, whether they believed in revolution, nonviolence, or communism. 8. The Swadeshi message was also spread through folk songs that were popular in villages. These were simple songs that everyone could understand, like Palajit, village songs, and Jari Gan, songs from Muslim villages. Fairy tales for children. 9. Books like Thakur Marjuli, meaning grandmother's tales, were written to give Indian children stories that came from their own culture. These fairy tales became very popular, and even today, children in Bengal love reading these stories. Art and paintings. 10. In the world of art, the Swadeshi movement inspired Indian artists to move away from British styles of painting. At the time, most art in India followed a British, Victorian style. One famous artist, Abanindranath Tagore, wanted to make Indian art more like it used to be in the past. 11. He took inspiration from Mughal art, Rajput art, and Ajanta cave paintings to create something uniquely Indian. 12. Nandalal Bose, another famous artist, was a student of Abanindranath Tagore. He received the first scholarship from the Indian Society of Oriental Art in 1907, which was an important society for promoting Indian art. Science and learning. 13. The Swadeshi movement also inspired people in the field of science. Jagdish Chandra Bose, Prafulla Chandra Ray, and others worked on scientific research that became famous around the world. These Indian scientists showed that Indians were capable of making big discoveries and didn't need to rely on British scientists. Real-life example to understand it better. Imagine if your entire town was buying everything from one shop that belonged to someone from another country. One day, people in your town decide, let's open our own shops, make our own products, and sell to each other. This would make everyone feel proud because now you are self-reliant. You are doing everything on your own. In the same way, the people in India started Indian businesses, created Indian art, sang Indian songs, and did Indian scientific research. They wanted to show that India was strong and could do everything without British help. Key points to remember. Self-reliance, Atmasakti, during the Swadeshi movement was about doing things independently and supporting Indian businesses. The movement inspired new Indian businesses in different industries like textiles, soaps, and banks. It had a big impact on Indian culture, especially in music, art, and education. Indian artists and scientists began to create their own work and became famous around the world. The Swadeshi movement was not just about business. It was also about celebrating Indian culture and talent in every field, from songs to science. If you need more clarification or want more examples, feel free to ask.